Hello everyone and welcome back to the final chicane with me, Cristin Hello everyone, welcome to the Formula 1 mid-season review. Last week I did the F1 Academy season review if you missed that, and if you did miss it, go watch it because it's never too late to start getting into F1 Academy if you don't know a thing about it this year or what's happened or you got lost somewhere on the way. Then now is your chance to regather yourself and learn a bit and get ready to follow F1 Academy because they start again next week in Zandvoort, same as Formula 1. But today we are here to talk about Formula 1 and everything that has happened up until this moment and over the summer break and just my opinions on everything. But first, Riddle of the Week, like always. In 75, I made my mark with half a point in a race cut dark. 12 Grand Prix starts, I took my chance. In the world of speed, I made my stance. Though podiums eluded my grasp that year, my legacy in F1 remains clear. Who am I? So, like always, I will tell you the answer to that at the end of today's episode and the story behind the person. Who was it last week? It was Maldonado last week. I have to say, week in, week out, the setup here just doesn't get better at all. I've got a new suitcase now holding up the final chicane sign. I've got suitcases all around me. There's that microphone that keeps breaking on me all the time. Other than that, I think we're good. The mic is working, the camera's working, the laptop's working. A lot to be grateful for this week. Where to start? For F1 Academy, I know I did it race by race. And I think that worked out fine. Should I do it race by race? What do you think? Or should I do it driver by driver or team by team? I think I'll do it race by race. Because, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it race by race because it's my choice. It's my podcast. And you're just going to have to deal with it if that's not the format that you want it in. We'll talk about every race so far this season. Then we'll do the summer break and all of the news sort of that has came about into the drama in Formula 1 since January this year. And then I will give you my rating list so far at the mid-season point, which I'm a little scared to do because everyone has an opinion and everyone is going to disagree with my ratings. And I only did them in like 2 minutes. So I guess we should just get started on the mid-season review. Only 7 more days until Formula 1 is back. It's Friday now. So next Friday we'll have free practice. There's also something very unexciting on next Friday that I have to do that I will tell you in the episode after in the Zandvoort review because I don't want to even talk about it right now. I'm going to miss both FPs though. Okay, Bahrain, where we started the season. A max win in Bahrain, if you can't remember. First of all, actually, so before I start my recap, I'm going to say that all of my recap and all of this information is from what I wrote in my notes during the season because I wanted my raw opinions and everything that I thought myself before, media might have influenced my opinions or whatever it was. And also, like, some things that were important to me might not be important enough for other people to, like, do in their recaps for any of the races. So that's why I'm doing it this way. These are the main points that I found important in Bahrain. And if I've left anything out, that's just simply because I didn't write it down. And maybe I had a lazy week and I didn't write a lot of stuff down in some weeks. But this is just what I'm going to tell you because we're going to recap on the season. And we're going to start in Bahrain because that's where the season started. From Bahrain, it looked like Max was going to run away with it. I mean, I think we all sort of thought that after the first race, the first 2 races. Maybe things got off to sort of a slow start for a lot of the teams, apart from Red Bull. And it did really look like a season where Red Bull were just going to dominate completely. And it didn't actually turn out to be that, as we've seen in the most recent races. I think Max didn't win a race in the whole of July. Bahrain. Max won by 22 seconds, which, considering where we are now, is incredible. 22 seconds winning to second place. It's sort of insane when you look back on it now. We saw quite early on the Mercedes-Ferrari battle. That has fizzled out a little. It was definitely more P2, Mercedes, Ferrari sort of battle, and McLaren wormed their way in there, which I'm pretty sure is the complete opposite to my pre-season predictions, which I'm not even going to look at until the end of the season. You know what? I'm not even going to listen to my pre-season predictions, which is my very first podcast episode, until the last episode, and I'll listen to them while recording my podcast episode to see how wrong I was. Yeah, see how easy I get sidetracked. Anyway, yeah, Mercedes versus Ferrari battle fizzled out a bit. The first free practice, wasn't it Hamilton and Ricciardo won in FP1 and FP2? Because I missed the first free practice because I was flying home, always in the airports on these wrong times. And I was like, oh my god, or we have it this season. Like Red Bull and Visa Cash App or B, they're going to be like Red Bull is obviously going to be on top, but Visa Cash App are going to be like so close to getting podiums this year. I really had faith. And then Daniel getting P1 in FP1 or FP2, I can't remember which one it was, really added to my delusions. And God, that changed quickly. That changed quickly. Also, one of my first notes written in this entire notebook really says how accurate I was. I said Alpine not looking good. That didn't change. I mean, they looked better, but oh my god, Alpine were not looking good at the start either in the free practices, and then the qualifying both below at the bottom of the grid. I also wrote here that McLaren were not making too much noise. Like quiet driving, nothing, boom. Nothing spectacular to it. They were just sort of there. And that also changed for the better. At least we saw that. It was a good race. Not the most exciting race. I think the most dramatic point from Bahrain was in the last few laps between Visa Cash App or B, which I was not expecting. And if you can't remember, basically Daniel was behind Yuki and he was faster than Yuki. They were both outside of the points. I think they might have been 11th and 12th or something like that. And Yuki got team orders to let Daniel pass because Daniel was lapping faster. Yuki refused for like a couple of laps, I think, and then eventually let Daniel pass. But at that point, it was sort of too late for Daniel to really make up time to overtake the car because, 2 laps sort of mean everything in Formula 1, or however many laps it was. It might have just been one. And so Daniel ended up not gaining a position. So the swapping didn't really work in the end. It could have. It had a good chance to, but it didn't work. And Yuki was raging at that call basically that he swapped. There were no points involved. So I don't think it was a huge deal. But then the main drama of it came after the checkered flag when Daniel was driving. They were both doing their outlap and Yuki basically sort of went off. Daniel was ahead of Yuki. Yuki sort of went off the track, and then when he was coming back on, he like dive bombed Daniel. And Daniel had to sort of swerve, and that resulted in Daniel calling Yuki a helmet. And they were both just so angry. And later, a week later or whatever, they unfollowed each other on Instagram. I was like, this is not a good start to the season. I had such high hopes for Visa, Cash App, or B, and now all of a sudden they seem to hate each other, which I know they don't actually hate each other. And relationships on track are very different to relationships off track. But I found that so funny. I texted my sister during the race and I was like, oh, just watch, Yuki's about to unfollow Daniel, I'll correct myself, Daniel never followed Yuki in the first place, so it was just Yuki that unfollowed Daniel. It's Instagram. Don't really care. Like, who cares who follows each other? But I think unfollowing is sort of a big deal, like, after something like that, because you have to go into their account and press unfollow. It's sort of iconic of Yuki, like, he's just so angry. But yeah, that was the main point from Bahrain. And my last point, Carlos started off with a bang to the season. He had an incredible race in Bahrain, and that went downhill very fast because then came Jeddah, and Carlos got appendicitis. So Carlos got appendicitis, had to get his appendix removed, so he was out for the weekend. He should have been out for longer, but he somehow got himself back for the next race. He was replaced by Ollie Behrman. What a time for both of these drivers. Carlos, getting that time off, we know how he did the next race, but Ollie Behrman getting that chance to prove himself, which, in my opinion, ultimately solidified the fact that he was going to get a Formula 1 seat because of how well he did, and he scored points. And yeah, it was in the Ferrari and it was in a faster car, but also his first time driving a Formula 1 car in a race, and he manages to hold on to the points and qualify and everything like that, I thought was very impressive. So unlucky for Carlos, but lucky for Ollie Behrman that he got to showcase that. Alpine had problems in that race. Jeddah was the race that the controversy with Lando's jump start was, because if you saw it, Lando had quite a significant jump start. He moved quite a bit off his marks, and then it didn't trigger the sensor though, even though like by human eye it was a jump start, but mechanically it didn't trigger the sensor. So he didn't get a penalty or anything for that, and he did stop before the lights out, so he moved forward and then he stopped. So he did start the race higher than he should have been, but also that probably slowed him down at the start as well, because obviously it was an accidental jump start. But then a rule came in after that basically if you move off the lines and the sensor isn't triggered, whatever, jump starts and you get penalised for it. The drama came because I think there was one other person who jump started, and then Daniel jump started one of the races. I can't remember which race it was now, but I'll have it written down in my notes. And Daniel, he didn't really jump start, he had a rolling start because it was quite wet, and you could see him move a lot less than Lando did, and he got quite a significant penalty for that after the race. I think he got a grid penalty, probably 3 place grid penalty. But that was the reason, because although Lando's jump start was more severe, that was before the rule came in place, and which I think is weird, adding rules mid-season, because that would be probably quite an issue if it was between like Max and Lando didn't get a penalty for jump starting, and then later on in the season Max had a rolling start and did get a penalty. And imagine like if that penalty actually ended up like determining it ended up being I can't speak. Oh my god. It ended up being the result of like one of them winning and one of them losing. Anyway, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm never going to be completely on board with rules changing or being further cemented. You know what I mean? Mid-season. But it was between Daniel and Lando, and there was another jump start in there, but I can't for the life of me remember who it was that jump started now. Jeddah, we also saw the start of the Magnussen DRS train that continued for the rest of the season still. Oh, and Albon's overtake. That one of my favourite overtakes. Albon had the sexiest overtake ever on 2 cars. I can't remember the 2 cars. Daniel was one of them, and that was the overtake of the season for me, especially on a track like Jeddah. I just find that's just even more impressive. So yeah, Jeddah, Behrman came P7 in the end, 6 points in his first Formula 1 race. He overtook like everyone on the grids who hadn't scored points, obviously. McLaren got a bit stronger in Jeddah. They were definitely looking stronger, and it was a 1-2 for Red Bull. Perez at the start of the season was looking very promising. He was fast, he was keeping up with Max, not completely keeping up with Max, but keeping up enough where he needed to be. And even after the penalty for Perez to finish 1-2 with Red Bull, very impressive. So starting off, first 2 races, McLaren, strong enough. Max stronger than ever. Perez still strong, still exactly where he needed to be. Carlos looking at the next one to be stronger. It was almost, obviously he didn't race in race 2, but race 1, very impressive from Carlos. That was sort of how it was looking. Australian Grand Prix is where everything switched up a little. Max had his early retirement. His car was in smoke. It was on fire, which led to Ferrari getting a 1-2 and a Lando in P3. Actually, the Australian Grand Prix is where that ad for Valtteri Bottas came out. And if you haven't seen it, go look it up now. He was promoting Uber, I think it was. And I'm not even going to explain it, just watch it, because I have that wrote down, because that obviously impacted me a lot. And Valtteri was very iconic for that ad. You would think that Max's retirement after winning Bahrain and Jeddah would be the main point of interest, the main talking point of that weekend. But actually, I think the main drama from Australian Grand Prix was between the Williams boys. because Alex crashed in FP something and took Logan's car for the rest of the weekend. So James Vales decided that although Alex was the one who crashed and that car was not drivable for the rest of the weekend, only one Williams driver could drive, and he didn't want that to be Logan, he wanted that to be Alex. I have my own opinions on that. I don't agree with it. From a team aspect, I know you need your chance to maximise points, but Williams were nowhere near the points at this point. And if one car just happens to be a little faster than the other, absolutely give that car to the better driver. But if one driver crashes their own car, I feel like that's so unfair to give your car to the driver who crashed when you did nothing wrong. I mean, Logan was very mature about that though, and obviously it's not Alex's fault either. So yeah, that was a bit of drama, which continued on to the next race as well. Daniel and Oscar's home race in Australia. Daniel had his lap time deleted, so he had an awful qualifying, and that just really sums up Daniel's history in Australia at the Australian Grand Prix, to be honest. Perez had his 3-place grid penalty for impeding. It was lap 3 that Max retired, and unsurprisingly, Alpine had more problems. I think that was 3 races in a row that they had some problems. And that George crash, that was scary when George went into the middle of the track and the car was sideways and they didn't red flag it immediately, which they should have, because you would never know how long it would take to fix that and get him out safely or whatever. So there was no reason, even if they were going slow past George, they needed to go back into the pits and just wait there so no one was going around again. So yeah, that wasn't a lovely thing to watch. Alonso had problems. This point is sort of where Alonso's season started to go downhill a bit. Not too dramatically downhill, but just not a very positive season for Alonso from here. He also got a penalty for brake testing, a 20-second penalty, which was also a bit of controversy over that, if it was worth the penalty, if that always happens. There is a bit of unbalance, I think, sometimes in the rules, and if one person gets penalised for this and the other doesn't, which I think sort of needs to, I think that's the one thing Formula 1 need to focus on, is being consistent with penalties. Yeah, that's it really. An Australia Grand Prix to top off Carlos's Bahrain and Carlos getting appendicitis. He was back for Australia and he won it. He won without the appendix, so obviously that was the tenths that were holding him off. So yeah, I think after race 3, Carlos really emerged as someone to watch out for, someone that Red Bull were going to have to watch out for, especially if the car would be unreliable and if Perez was making the mistakes that would get him a penalty. Obviously a 1-2 for Ferrari, so Charles was right up there as well. Carlos and Charles quite even at the start of the season. I think for the first maybe 3 races, or 2 races, I guess, Carlos was probably a tiny bit ahead, but then Charles was quite strong in Jeddah against Ollie Behrman, so sort of evening out a little at this point. Then we go to Japan, Yuki's home race. The podium in Japan was Verstappen, Perez and Sainz. Again, Sainz on the podium, continuing his incredible run. Williams gave Logan a car this time, but they gave Logan Alex's broken car. And again, I was like, no way. Like, they can't do this to Logan. It's race 4. And he didn't race last weekend and now he's getting a broken car. And then Logan crashed in FP1 and I was like, oh, okay. You know what? At least the broken car was the one who crashed. This is why I'm not a team principal, because I wouldn't be able to make these decisions. But I can say I wouldn't handle it as maturely as Logan is, because I probably would have just purposely crashed, took the car and crashed. It was like, if I can't drive, no one can drive this weekend, the Williams. Oscar can speak Japanese. That's the most impressive thing I've ever learned about a Formula 1 driver. Japanese is not an easy language to speak. I tried learning Japanese before. Before the Japanese Grand Prix, I spent a week trying to learn Japanese, so I'd say a few lines on TikTok or whatever and didn't go in. And then Japan was also where Daniel and Albon had that crash. Quite a scary crash, actually. It was quite a big one. It was right at the start of the race and obviously caused a red flag. No one got a penalty for that. I think It probably would have been more Daniel's fault than Albon's fault, but in the end it was just, first lap sort of incident which happens. That was also when everyone was going crazy because Max said on his team radio, he was like, "Is everyone okay?" after the crash, and his engineer GP was like, "Yeah, Daniel's out of the car. Like, let's not talk about Alex." But that was just because Daniel was the only one out of the car and Alex wasn't out of the car yet. But everyone was like, "Oh, he just knew he wanted to hear about Daniel." And maybe that was the case, but we all know how much everyone loves Alex too. I just thought that's what I have wrote down. Max asking, "Is everyone okay?" And that being the response. I was like, "Girl, ask about Alex." There's no hate on Max or Alex, obviously. I just thought that was funny. See, this is why I write my notes down, because I have some of the most useless information that probably most people don't care about. But they might trigger your little memories about what happens in the race so far this season. Chinese Grand Prix. This was actually an emotional weekend for me, seeing Joe that emotional at his first ever home race, potentially his last home race, because it doesn't look like he has a future in Formula One next year. It was also the first sprint weekend, which made everything so much more exciting. Alex had that incredible Panda helmet, best helmet of the season so far. Especially just watching them drive around and just watching a Panda drive around on track was funny. Japan or China, the Chinese Grand Prix was also where Alonso re-signed his contract 2025 plus. So they've started to be a little sneaky with the contracts this year. They haven't really been given exact dates, years of how long the contracts are. But I don't know if that was too much of a surprise. It was a little surprise. The Chinese Grand Prix is also where the grass kept setting on fire. Do you remember that? Set on fire in like free practice, and then was it the race or qualifying it set on fire again? And it would just be like normal grass just chilling there, and then all of a sudden it's on fire. I respect that grass so much to just set fire to yourself. I know there was definitely a reason that it was setting on fire, like, I don't know, friction from something to do with the cars or the heat or whatever it was. Probably not the heat, I don't think it was that warm, but you know what I mean. But yeah, it was just funny. Every now and again the camera would flash back to the grass and it would just be on fire. Um, it's also where Charles went into the barrier, on a less funny topic, in the sprint qualifying. Everyone was going off in the Chinese sprint qualifying actually. Lando got pole, then he got his lap time deleted, and then he got his lap time reinstated. For track limits he got it deleted, then was reinstated, so that was a bit of a up and down for Lando fans. Chinese Grand Prix also apparently is where Pierre got his first overtake of the season. What is that, the 5th race of the season? I don't know if that's true. I just saw that once and I ran with it. But if that was Pierre's first overtake of the season, like, he's a very good driver. It's just Alpine was not doing it for him this season so far. Alonso's season continued to go downhill from here. He got a puncture, if you remember that. Quite a dramatic puncture. And then 10-second penalty. Yuki qualified P19. I don't know what happened there actually. And Hamilton P18, Perez P15. Qualifying was a bit all over the place. And then another Ferrari crashed. Carlos crashed this time. Hulk and Bottas made it to Q3. Hulk, we'll talk about him later, but Hulk has been on fire this season. He got a new contract, and rightly so. Bottas too. Bottas making it to Q3. That Seba was not a Q3 car, or steak, whatever you want to call it, was not a Q3 car. Max on pole for the Chinese Grand Prix. Joe getting points in the sprint. Just all good vibe weekend. And then there was more drama with the Visa Cash App Orbs in the race. If you remember, there was a safety car. And then Lance went into the back of Daniel just as the safety car was ending and they were going around the corner. And yeah, Daniel had to retire. His race was ruined from then. And then at the same time, at the back of the field, Magnussen and Yuki collided and Yuki had to retire. His car went off. So both Visa Cash App Orbs were targeted that weekend. They were bullied on track. They both got taken out. And Daniel was in points as well, which was even more frustrating. Perez was more consistent, so I couldn't really fault his Chinese Grand Prix. Nothing to write home about, but also nothing to not write home about. That doesn't make any sense. Lewis P19 to P9. Very impressive. Hamilton definitely started emerging from here on. He didn't have a bad start to the season, just nothing too impressive, but you could really see Hamilton start to get there from here, get his confidence back, and it did start to look like the Hamilton that we know and love. So P19 to P9, obviously not great qualifying, but it just showed when he's confident in a race what he can do. And then Ricciardo got a penalty because after he got hit by Stroll, I think Stroll went by him, and then Daniel, out of anger, like overtook Stroll again, probably off track or something, and he ended up getting a penalty, which was not ideal. Miami, another sprint weekend, because we needed 2 sprint weekends in a row for some reason. I always loved the Miami Grand Prix. I love the vibes. Track's not my favourite, but this Miami Grand Prix was the best by far. Hook to Sauber was announced. Announced quite early in the season, but as of now, doesn't look like a mistake for Sauber to trust Hulk, and then for Audi to trust Hulk in 2026. And then the other big news was Adrian Newey leaving Red Bull. We don't know still what's going on with Adrian Newey. Right now the rumours are Aston Martin. Honestly, knowing my luck, by the time that I release this episode, which will hopefully be tomorrow or Sunday, it'll probably be announced and everyone will be like, girl, it's been announced, what are you talking about? The bad luck of saying something and then ending my podcast and then it being announced and everyone thinks I'm just so behind on everything. Miami also, Visa Cash App RB had that incredible livery. Lots of SQ times deleted in Miami. Sargent actually outqualified Albon, I think, for the first time. Both Mercedes out in Q2. Hulk in SQ3 again, on top of his form that weekend, mentally and physically. Daniel P4. That was impressive. He obviously knew that he had that penalty coming on Sunday, so he was like, yeah, let me show him what I can do on Friday and Saturday then. And then the sprint happened. The Miami sprint was where Esteban and Charles had some contact in the pits. It didn't affect either too much, but just a bit of a dumb thing to happen. It wasn't Charles's fault at all. That was on Esteban. And then at the start of the sprint, Perez locked up, so Daniel was into Q3 in front of Perez and Carlos. Perez eventually got past because Perez had more pace. Miami's not a bad track for Perez at all. And yeah, Daniel managed to hold off Carlos for that entire race, which was the most impressive thing Daniel's done this season, I think, because how are you in a Visa Cash App or be holding off the Ferrari? And then Yuki actually made it to the top 10 in the end. He didn't qualify in the top 10. So a more successful weekend for Visa Cash App or B. A very strong weekend from Charles. Strong weekend from Checo again. Magnussen being a little terror on track, doing whatever he wanted. And Miami, Lando Norris's first win. Everyone liked to see that. Most people liked to see that. Actually, I don't care if you didn't like to see that. I liked to see that because it was always coming and now it is here. And I think that was the confidence point that Lando needed this season to really feel like he could push for that championship and to be able to fight Max. Whether he will or not in the second half of the season, I don't know. It all depends on the position of the cars, but he definitely made it known that this year is going to be an interesting year. Imola. Imola was where McLaren really emerged as title contenders for this year. Charles too. Carlos sort of got the better first half of the season, or first half of the ones that I've mentioned so far. And here is where Charles started to come alive. He had good Imola. Alex got his contract extension in Imola. Seb was in Imola. He did his little support for Ratzenberger and Senna, which was a nice thing to see. Imola, there was the green and the yellow and the red and white Austria wristbands for Roland. There was also the crash between Alonso and Perez ended up out in Q2, and then Hulk into Q3 again, because Hulk is called Hulk for a reason. Stroll emerged then as the tyre whisperer. One thing I've noticed about Stroll is he can make those tyres last. He's done an incredible job this season, solely, I mean on a few things, but solely to mention how good he is at managing his tyres. Especially in, what was the last race? Was it the British Grand Prix or something where the strategies were just effed up, but Stroll became the new tyre whisperer, I think. He's also, so far, has got the better of Alonso. The Aston Martin, I don't think, is what they thought it would be, But yeah, I'd say a good start from Stroll as well. Monaco. Monaco is where Oscar got adopted by Charles Leclerc. Oscar does this thing where he tries to find his nationality, like 1/10, whatever, in whatever race it is, so he can call it his home race. And he said that he didn't have any relation, and Charles said that he would adopt Oscar. So Oscar is now Leclerc. Monaco is where Haas got disqualified from quali. Pierre got into Q3. Highlight of the season for Alpine, Pierre getting into Q3 with that. Also, do you remember the boat crash? There was a boat crash in Monaco that weekend. The boat went up onto the dock. That was a bit extreme. There was also the big crash then in Monaco. Two crashes in two races for Perez. The crash was between Magnussen, Perez, and Hulk. Not Perez or Hulk's fault. It was more on Magnussen. Magnussen hit into Perez and Perez hit into Hulk. I think that's what happened. And quite a scary crash. Quite a lot of damage done. Any crash in Monaco always gets you a bit on the edge of your seat, hoping everyone is okay. And everyone was okay. Then the most special, or one of the most special moments of the season so far, came where Charles won his home race, his first ever win in Monaco, after the crazy history he's had in Monaco with some incredible qualifyings and then the bad luck that comes with his races. And it was just such a relief to see him finally get that win and hear the Monegascan anthem. Is he the first ever Monegascan to ever win the Monaco Grand Prix? I think he is. And what a special moment. Canadian Grand Prix, Perez re-signed with Red Bull. He signed it 2 years. That one was surprising, I think. At this point, Perez wasn't having a bad season, I wouldn't say anyway. He was unlucky to get caught up in that crash in Monaco. Obviously, the Alonso and Perez incident in Imola. But before that, he was quite consistent and he was keeping up with Max. So I think it was just a little earlier than people were expecting. And honestly, lucky for Perez because unfortunately his season did have a turning point from here on out. George got his first ever pole. Him and Max got identical times in the Canadian Grand Prix. If you remember that, it was 1:12.000. But George had his time in first. So he ended up on pole. Very special moment. He did his arms pose. The Canadian Grand Prix is where Jacques Villeneuve decided that he needed to speak on Daniel. Something he's been doing for the entire time I've been watching Formula 1. I don't know why he hates Daniel so much, but he hates him. God, he was vicious on Daniel. And I disagree with a lot of what he said, and I know a lot of people don't. But please go watch the Canadian Grand Prix, my Canadian Grand Prix review, if you want to hear my opinion on it, because I think I had a 10-minute rant, and I'm absolutely not doing that again for this episode. Yuki also re-signed with Visa Cash App or B for next year. Not the best timing for Daniel while he was getting obliterated in the media by Villeneuve and his teammate getting a re-sign and him not. It also felt a bit rushed from Visa Cash App or B. I don't know, maybe Yuki was getting offers from other teams because Yuki was definitely the most impressive Visa Cash App or B driver at this point, and the renewal was not a surprise at all. Visa Cash App or B would be crazy to let Yuki go. So he got that 1 year extension. Perez then on the weekend that he re-signed his contract got out in Q1. He was out in Q1. Ferrari were out in Q2. And yeah, a good day for Visa Cash App. Daniel P5 and Yuki P8. So quite a good weekend overall. I'm happy Daniel got a good result actually. I forgot that he got P5 there. But yeah, sometimes I wish Daniel was just a little bit more of a see you next Tuesday to people. I'm not what's the word? I don't like conflict. What is the word I'm looking for? This is my problem. I always can never think of the words I'm looking for. I don't like drama when I'm involved in it. I don't like to be confrontational. But if someone said half the stuff about me that they said on live TV to millions of people, brother, I'd probably do it in the form of like a shady TikTok or something. Because no, to be honest, I'm better at standing up for Daniel than I am myself. Barcelona! Oh, I want to cry every time I think of Barcelona because I was at that race. I actually got tear up right now thinking about Barcelona. How am I crying? Just because I said the Barcelona Grand Prix. But the Barcelona Grand Prix was one of the best weekends of my entire life. because I met all of the drivers. Barcelona Grand Prix, like, we got to the paddock because my cousin lost her camera, and I have a whole episode explaining what happened there and how we met all those F1 Academy drivers and the Formula 1 drivers and Susie Wolf and Toto and everyone. We met everyone except Lewis, Perez, and Daniel. They didn't, I don't know what happened there. They didn't come out that way for some reason. But yeah, I don't even remember what happened during the race because I was just, anyway, you weren't there. You definitely do not care as much as I do. But Lando did get pole at Barcelona and he finished P2 in the end, which, yeah, quite an impressive race. Max won, followed by Lando, and P3 was Russell. Not too much of a dramatic weekend. Bad weekend for Visa Cash App Board B, not a great weekend for Aston Martin or Checo or Alpine. And Mercedes were definitely starting to come back up a bit. And that brings us on to the Austrian Grand Prix, which was another sprint weekend. I always love the Austria Grand Prix. I really want to go to Austria. It's like one of my dream destinations. Not in the winter. I've been skiing before and I don't like skiing. I'd probably like it if I tried it again. But I just want to go be in the mountains, in the Alps, in those cute little Alp cottages. Sorry, you're here to talk about Formula 1. Anyway, Pierre got a new contract signed and Lance got a new contract. Lance's contract was not too much of a surprise. I think Pierre's was a little surprise because we weren't sure if he was going to stick with Alpine because obviously they weren't looking the best. Obviously, he has been driving the Alpine the way that he needs to be driving it, so there was no reason why he shouldn't have got the renewal. But yeah, it was more a surprise if he was going to stick with Alpine or not. Logan out qualified Albon. Every time Logan out qualified Albon, I wrote that down as a point because we know how incredible Alex is. And Logan, I feel like, just doesn't get enough credit when he does stuff right, so I like to be there to boost him up a little. Austria was also the mess of qualifying where everyone left it really late to come out in Q3, and I think only Charles didn't get to the line in time. Max got pole, then it was again Norris P2, and then Piastri P3. Haven't spoken too much about Oscar, but from Austria on, this is where he really, really emerged. I've been saying that about a lot of drivers, but really from here Oscar was on fire. I mean, he was consistent all season so far, but he was more than consistent. He was great. Alpine started looking better, so that was a nice turning point for Alpine to finally be getting up there a bit. Charles was a little iconic that race. It was also the race that Oscar overtook Lando. There was a bit of drama about that. So yeah, Piastri got Q3, but then he got his time deleted from Q3, which was quite unlucky. So there's that. And then the race, unfortunately, Oscar squeezed Charles a little at the first corner and they had a bit of damage. Haas being a terror again. And then Max and Lando crashed, which we were waiting for sort of all season. So Max and Lando's crash ultimately, I won't say resulted because, I mean, it did sort of result in Russell getting the win, but I don't think that's anything on Russell because he didn't crash. So I always hate when people are like, oh, this person only won because Max DNF'd. Yeah, but this person didn't DNF. So they won fair and square. That's fine, Douglas. Just shake your collar right at the microphone. Piastri and Sainz both on the podium as well after that little Lando and Max accident. So that's quite a nice podium. Quite a new podium. Russell, Piastri and Sainz. British Grand Prix, Silverstone. Ollie Behrman to Haas was announced. A multi-year as well for a rookie. Very impressive. Unsurprising considering how well he did at Ferrari. Hopefully that wasn't a sort of Nick de Vries Monza situation, because I think we'd all love to see Haas and Ollie Behrman do well next year. Checo's future then began to be under pressure because of his low performance, and that's sort of where it started. And obviously when so many people are talking about your performance and everything like that, it's going to add more pressure onto you, and it's just a cycle, quite a vicious sort of cycle. And if Perez already wasn't under enough pressure, then he beat the car and was P19 in qualifying. So that led Russell, Hamilton and Norris then in P3. The race then, unfortunately, Alpine's sort of luck for a short period of time anyway, came to an end because Gasly DNF'd. Lewis then got a remarkable and incredible 9th victory at Silverstone. Once again, another win everyone loved to see, and if you didn't, I don't care. And Charles, sort of question mark. I just have Charles question mark written down because after Monaco, his season sort of disappeared from him. He obviously used up all of his luck because we know Charles does not have the best luck. So he must have used up all his luck in Monaco and then was like, yeah, we need to hold back for a few races. 2 more races left. We're nearly there, guys. Hungarian Grand Prix. The main topic of conversation was Magnussen as he loses. Chico, come on. My boy Chico is too scared to come up the stairs. This is the second podcast episode in a row that he has interrupted. Okay. You want to be in it again? Did you enjoy your feature last week? Hungarian Grand Prix where Magnussen loses his seat, and then there were floods and the McLaren motorhome was destroyed. Yuki had quite a scary enough crash in quali that actually ended up injuring him, and we didn't realise how badly he was injured until after the race, and the next race where he was still injured from it. And then the most dramatic McLaren moment of the season came in the form of race orders at McLaren when, the drama, like I don't even think I want to go through it again. Obviously, if you want to hear any further into my opinions, you can watch because I do a review on every single race, so that's where you can get my opinions on it. But quite a strange call from McLaren, a bad team strategy call, unfair on Oscar, unfair on Lando, and yeah, definitely put a damper on Oscar's first win. Not too much of a damper, I think the win was still impressive. Oscar had an impressive weekend. Everyone was like, you know what, Oscar just seemed so subdued on the radio, like he didn't seem happy at all. But honestly, I just think that's Oscar. I don't think he was too upset. It was the near clash for Hamilton and Max in the Hungary Grand Prix, and it's just a strategy fumble for most teams in general. And we are now down to the last race before the summer break, the Belgian Grand Prix, where we saw George Russell win and then get disqualified. So Hamilton ended up winning his second race of the season. A nice surprise for Hamilton fans, a horrible surprise for George Russell fans. And then Perez got pole, exactly what he needed. It was essential that Perez did well that weekend. So these dogs are trying to ruin my career. He got what he needed with that. And Esteban was announced to go to Haas. I didn't even say that Esteban got fired, sorry. I didn't have that in my notes, but yeah, Este got fired at some point during the season. And then he got re-signed to Haas, which I'm happy for him because I don't think he deserved to get fired. The summer break drama so far, not too much. Perez stays with Red Bull. Obviously there was questions on whether Perez would be fired or not. He won't be fired. He's staying with Red Bull for at least the next 3 races, at least until Mexico anyway. The way they worded it was a little suspicious. This whole thing is suspicious though about Perez getting his contract renewed because both Helmut and Christian said that they would have to think about it and that they would make decisions over the summer break, and they had the test of Liam and Yuki and Daniel on that Thursday and Friday, and then on Monday, the first day of summer break, they decided that Perez was staying midway through the day. So something happened there that persuaded them because they had no reason to just give themselves half a day to decide, if that makes sense. Obviously there were some rumours that, Carlos Slims and Carlos Slims Jr. had some sort of involvement. Rumours are rumours. Helmut said that wasn't the case, and then different journalists and news channels are reporting different things in relation to that, so that's very much what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe there, so I'm not going to tell anyone what's true because I don't know what's true there. Carlos was announced to be going to Williams finally. Carlos fans can rest knowing that Carlos will have a seat next year. Even if it is with Williams, we don't know how Williams are going to do. They could completely turn it around. And Carlos could be the thing that they need to do that. They've obviously got an incredible driver in the hands of Alex Albon. Unfortunately, that does mean Logan is going to be out of Formula 1 at the end of the season. I don't think that has been a surprise based on how the team have been treating him. Not as big shades to the team, but you can just tell, like, a driver isn't going to stay if they're taking away his car from him at the second race of the season. Jonathan Wheatley then left Red Bull, another domino in the Red Bull employee market who's falling. And Jonathan Wheatley, he is the sporting director for Red Bull, so he is very important and he has had an incredible impact on Red Bull and the results over the years. And now he is going to be a team manager, a team boss for Audi, for Sauber. with Andrea Seidel leaving. So that's quite a good thing for him because I think he's always wanted to be a team boss. Obviously, the news that happened earlier on this year, the biggest transfer news, is Lewis to Ferrari as well, which I'm sure we're all just tired of talking about until it actually happens. Then one of the most exciting things to happen, the introduction of Leo Leclerc into the world of Formula One. If you know me, you know my two favourite things in life are animals and Formula One. As you can see with my dogs, how they've already made an appearance in 2 episodes in the last 2 episodes. So seeing that dog around the paddock has been a pleasure for me and has just made Formula One even better. And a dog that cute as well. I love Leo. Honestly, if I got into the paddock one day, he's the first thing I'd be running to see. When I do my rankings, I'm sort of scared to do my rankings because no matter what order I put these in, everyone is going to disagree. But this is just my opinion. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. This isn't something that I've given a lot of thought to. I honestly just scribbled this down last night based on what the first thing came to my mind. So if you disagree, let's not all be 2-year-olds in the comments and let's all just respect that we have a different opinion. So here's my ranking. I think I ranked Max P1, Lando P2, and Oscar P3. So they're my first three. I think Lando has been still that step ahead of Oscar. Not every race. I think Oscar is getting up there. I think Oscar has been impressive. But for this mid-season ranking, I'm going to put Lando ahead there. Everything may change by the end of the season. I'll do another one and see where things change. This one was hard. And this one, people will probably disagree with. But I put Carlos 4th and Charles 5th. Honestly, that's not a set in stone thing. For me, I originally had Charles first and then Carlos then, and then I switched it around a bit because I just feel like Carlos has had a more consistent good season, whereas Charles has had some incredible moments but then has been a little less consistent with incidents and a lot of stuff out of his control as well. But for that reason, Charles is 5th. Again, this one was hard and I had this the other way as well before I changed it. I have George 6th and Lewis 7th. Could be either way around. It's a hard one because I just think they're both just so by each other. George has had more mistakes this year, but he's also had more impressive moments, like his first pole, the win that was taken away from him. But then Hamilton got that win and Hamilton got the win in Silverstone. And I think George has just been a little more consistent with the good results. And I do think that's going to change. I think Lewis is going to have a banger of the second half of the season, so I would not be surprised at all if Lewis moves up a few places there. 8th, I have Hulk, because I think he's been incredibly impressive all season. 9th, Sonoda. Again, I think that's a fair place for Yuki because the Visa Cash App Orbi hasn't been the strongest car all season, but Yuki has been getting everything out of it. 10, I have Ricardo. I had him a bit lower. I moved him up because in the last few races, he's been consistent in the races. Qualifying is his problem though. So he could be a bit further down. But just because of his P4 and his P5 compared to everyone below him, I'm happy to put him in the top 10 for now. 11th, I have Stroll. And 12th, Alonso. Again, this isn't too big of a difference between them. That's just how I put the order. 13, Alex. He could be higher, I think. I think if I went back and examined his season further, I could find a place for him higher. I have Perez 14th because he's had some good moments. He had that pole obviously in the last race, but he's had more downer moments than positive moments this season, so I couldn't put him up in the top 10. Once again, if he turns it around for this season, he could easily get put in my top 5. And this is just my opinion. Who am I? Who actually cares? My opinion. Ocon I have as 15th and Gasly I have as 16th. Again, so many of the teammates are just so close this year. This wasn't a slam dunk. Ocon is better than Gasly. That's just where I landed on my whole thing. I have Bottas 17th, Magnussen 18th, Joe 19th, and Sargent 20th. I'm sure that's similar enough to the actual order of it. It's probably not the complete order, but that's just how I seen it. Obviously not including who's in a better car, just how people are doing, if that makes sense. Obviously a lot of how people are doing is because they're in a better car, but you know what I mean. Like Hulk isn't in a top 8 car, but he's in the top 8 because he's been getting everything out of the car and he's been driving. Like the Haas is a faster car than it is. So they are my 2024 mid-season rankings. Let me know yours below. God, this podcast episode's already long. Should we do Riddle of the Week? Yes, we should. Absolutely, we should do Riddle of the Week. So the answer of the Riddle of the Week is Lela Lombardi, who I have talked about before in one of my first podcast episodes. I think I did one on F1 Academy, maybe the women in motorsport, and she's an incredibly remarkable figure. So she was born Maria Grazia Lombardi in 1941 in Frugarolo, Italy. Frugarolo, again, pronunciation, out the door. And yeah, she started her career in racing. She just did more local events and then she made her way up the ranks, which eventually very impressively led her to Formula 1, and she competed from 1974 to 1976. Her most significant moment came in the 1975 Spanish Grand Prix, where she scored half a point in that race. The race was cut short, but she still scored half a point. And she's the only female driver in Formula 1 to ever score a point. She participated in 12 Grand Prix races. And even though she didn't score any points for the rest of the season, she had some great races, and she then moved on to sports car racing. And yeah, it was just an incredibly important symbol for women, that they could be anything they wanted. They could be in motorsport, even if it's a male-dominated sport. They can make it there. They can get that point, even if things aren't always in their favour. And her legacy did endure long past her passing in 1992. She died of breast cancer. And right up until 1992, she kept involved in motorsport, doing what she could. Says Lela Lombardi. So that is our mid-season review done. I hope the reviews of the races so far were okay. That's basically how the races went from my point of view, the things that I noticed most from the races. And I'm sorry if I did leave anything out, which I definitely did, because everything happens in Formula 1. So much happens in Formula 1, it's hard to keep up with. And yeah, I'll see you for Zandvoort review next week. Goodbye.